We're going to create a 3D drawing in TinkerCAD, and while doing so, we're going to learn how to use some of the tools available in TinkerCAD, such as the Raise tool, the Rotate tool, the Group tool, and the Work Plane tool. You'll have to take a screenshot of your TinkerCAD practice design at the end of this video and paste that screenshot on the TinkerCAD practice using tools worksheet. It will be graded, so please make sure the TinkerCAD shapes that I'm making, you're making as well as you're following along with the video. The first tool that we're going to practice in TinkerCAD is dimensioning objects using the click and drag method. First, you're going to sign into TinkerCAD, and then you're going to create new design by clicking this box. When you create a new design, you should see a blank blue work plane. Sometimes there's objects that already appear on that blue work plane. If you see objects already on your blue work plane, simply click this TinkerCAD logo and then click Create New Design again, and then you'll have a blank blue work plane available. First, let's name our drawing. And it always gives a really funny, crazy name, but this won't help us find our design later. So we're going to rename this. So if you click on it, it should highlight in blue, and then it'll just get replaced with your new name. We're going to name ours our last name practice. So my last name is Smith, and then I'm just going to type in practice. You're going to type in your last name in practice. We already talked about the 3 dimensions in a 3D object, and we named them width, depth, and height. TinkerCAD labels them with an X, Y, and Z. So as you can see, the width of this yellow box is labeled with X. The depth of this yellow box is labeled with Y, and the height of this box is labeled with Z. We can refer to the dimensions of width, depth, and height with those labels, or we can also refer to them as X, Y, and Z. Okay, so let's drag over an object from one of these objects on the right. Let's choose a box. Drag it over to the blue work plane and just drop it there. And now we can use these white squares right here to dimension our object. So if we drag one of these lower right squares or lower left squares, we'll notice that 2 dimensions change. And those 2 dimensions are width and depth. So if you click and drag, you'll notice that those 2 dimensions are changing. For example, right now, my width is 54 and my depth is 26. Sometimes the depth gets hidden behind this solid whole window, but that's okay. You can just go ahead and click on the left white square and drag it over, and then that depth number will be available to see. So go ahead and just play around with that and drag your width and depth to any width and depth that you want. You're going to notice if you try to make it really specific, it's difficult. Like if I wanted my width to be exactly 100 and I try to make it exactly 100, I could get it, but it's not that easy. So the click and drag method works, but it's not necessarily the best way to dimension. So if we've dimensioned the width and the depth, we have one more dimension. Can you name it? Yeah, you got it, height. That's this box right here. So if we grab this, we can make this taller and shorter. Again, I want you to notice the difficulty. If you pick out a specific height and then try to dimension it, for example, I'm going to pick 67. I can get it, but it's not that easy. If you notice right down here, it gives you the unit of measurement. And what it's telling us, that, first of all, that the unit of measurement is in millimeters. You could change that to another unit of measurement. For example, instead of metric, standard unit measurement of inches could be used. And then it tells you that each little box is 1 millimeter. That's one of these tiny little boxes within this bigger square. We are going to leave our unit of measurement in millimeters. So there's actually a better way to dimension objects. So now let's work on dimensioning objects by inputting specific measurements. So your box may look similar to mine, or it may have completely different dimensions, but we're going to make this a very specific dimension and yours will match mine exactly. So we're going to click on the white square down here. And when you hover over it, you can see width is 100 and depth is 46. Go ahead and click on that white square and then click on the width. And now we can input a very specific dimension. We're going to make the width 100. And you do not have to type in millimeters, it's automatically set to that. Now click on the depth, and we're going to make the depth 20 millimeters. Press enter. Now our width is 100 and our depth is 20 millimeters. We have one more dimension to put in. Can you name it? Yeah, you got it. It's height. Height is also known as Z. Go ahead and click on the top white square, and it says that it's 67. We're going to make the height 90. Type and enter. If your red box is being blocked by this window, you can go ahead and just click your mouse on it, hold down the mouse button, and you can drag it anywhere on the screen. You can check the dimensions of your box and make sure that they're 100 millimeters wide, 20 millimeters deep, and 90 millimeters tall. Some important tools to know on the left-hand side. So this tool right here is a fit view to selected shapes. I just call it the fit tool. And if you click on that, the shape that you're clicked on will automatically fit to the screen perfectly. This tool will zoom into the shape, so you can go ahead and practice with that. The minus tool, of course, zooms out. And again, the fit tool makes it fit just right. Go ahead and just take this red box and grab it with your mouse and move it to the back of the screen. You'll also notice that you should have arrows on your keyboard. On a Chromebook, they're usually located on the lower right. You'll see an up and down arrow and a right and left arrow. You can also use those to move your object on the screen. So I'm going to click my right arrow, and as you can see, my object is moving to the right. Now my left arrow to the left. My down arrow moves it forward, and my back arrow moves it back. So you can either use your mouse, hold your mouse button down, and just drag it to where you want, or you can use the arrow keys, but it has to be selected. So you have to see these white boxes. Otherwise, your arrow keys won't move it. So we just learned how to dimension an object. Let's now work on rotating an object. So let's drag over the blue sphere. So you see that shape on the right of your screen. Just hold down your mouse and drag it over and drop it onto the work plane. And we're going to first dimension this object, and then we're going to rotate it. So we're going to make this sphere 16 wide by 30 deep by 20 tall. So go ahead and click on one of those lower white squares. And we're going to make the width 15 wide. And we're going to make the depth 30. And last but not least, the height, that's the white box on the top. We're going to make it 20 tall, which it already is. So our sphere should be 15 wide, 30 deep, and 20 tall. We can change the color of any of our objects. Since our blue one is selected, we can see here that it's showing it's a blue solid shape. We'll talk about how to make it a whole later. If you click on that blue solid, you'll see a lot of options. So let's make ours a color green. And we can now rotate this object. So there's 3 different choices. So if you hover your mouse over some of these, you can see which way they rotate. So imagine that you have your hand on a sink knob and you're spinning it. And that's what this rotation would do for you. So you could spin it to the right clockwise, to the left counterclockwise. And then there's 2 more rotations that we'll talk about in a little bit. But let's just concentrate on this bottom one. And you can see when you put your mouse on it, it tells you that you're at 0 degrees because rotation is measured in degrees. And you can go ahead and just drag the shape around. I want you to first put it on 90 and see how it rotates. So that's a 90-degree rotation. So do that with me. I left my hand on my mouse. If I let go, it just kind of locks it in place. And then let's just go ahead and click on my shape again. And you'll notice that it now tells you that this is at 0 degrees. So if I rotated it again 90, that would actually be 180 degrees from my original. This undo button is a great tool to have in your toolbox because if you make a mistake, you can click undo and it takes you a step back. I'm going to click undo once and I'm going to click undo twice. And now I'm back to my original rotation. Now I want you to show you. I rotate it 90. That's what it looks like. I rotate it 180 and that's what it looks like. But if I were to click off of it, it would now tell me that this was not a 180-degree rotation. It would say that it was 0. And sure enough, it does. I'll use my undo button to bring me back. And that's how you use the rotation tool. So if you wanted to, you could just investigate a little bit what 90-degree rotation looks like, what 180-degree rotation looks like, what 270-degree rotation looks like, which is the same as minus 90, and last but not least, 360, which is the same as 0. So just mess around a little with your shape and rotate it. Let's take this shape and just get it out of the way. So I'm just going to, well, let me use my undo because I made a mistake there. I did not mean to change the dimensions. So you can either drag it over or you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard. If you use your arrow keys, then you won't make the same mistake I just made and accidentally redimension it. Okay, now that that green sphere is out of the way, let's go ahead and drag over a new shape and we're going to dimension it and we're also going to rotate it. So we want to make this cylinder 100 wide and 20 deep. So let's go ahead and grab onto one of these white squares, click on it, and change the width to 100 and the depth to 20, which it already is. And last but not least, we want to make the height, we're going to make that 90. I'm just going to take this cylinder using my arrow keys, make it more centered on my work plane. While I'm doing this, I want to show you the fit tool one more time. When you're clicked on a specific object, the fit tool will make this one particular object fit perfectly on your screen. Let me show you. However, if you're clicked off and then you click the fit object, it makes everything on your screen fit perfectly. Again, if I click on the cylinder and click the fit object, it zooms just the fit object into perfect view. So I want to rotate using the same rotate tool 90 degrees. But as you can see, when I put my mouse there, I can't see the degree box. So I can use my zoom out, click once or twice, and then when I click on it, now I can see my degrees. I want you to type in 90 and enter and see what happens. If you click off that object and then back on, it's now going to tell you that that new degrees is 0, even though we know that it didn't start out that way and we actually already rotated it 90 degrees. If I type in 90 again, enter, it rotates it another 90 degrees, and we now know this is actually 180 degrees from its original. Because this rotation tool sometimes adds our rotations up instead of starting out from the beginning, a lot of people will choose, if they make a mistake on their first rotation, to choose the undo tool, and so they know they're starting off right from the original again. The next rotate tool is really difficult to see. Here it is. It's so faint and sometimes it's really difficult to see, but here it is. And I imagine that one as if somebody was doing a cartwheel and rotating themselves. So go ahead and click on that and type in 90 to see what happens. 90, enter. And then the third rotation tool is right here. If you go ahead and click on that, that's like a door handle, turning it to the right or to the left. So go ahead and type in 90, enter. But I actually want you to undo that. So I want you to click the undo button, and we're going to leave it as its original. So yours should look something like this. So remember, there's 3 different ways to rotate an object, and you can rotate it in 2 different ways. You can either click on one of those arrows and use your mouse as you're holding down the mouse button and spin it, or you can click on it and specifically put in a degrees that you want it rotated. If you click off the shape and then click back on it, remember that the degrees become cumulative. They add together. So often if somebody makes a mistake on their first rotation, they'll click the undo button and start from scratch. As you recall, every time I dragged over an object, it sunk and sat perfectly on the work plane. However, I can see now that my orange cylinder is no longer sitting on the work plane. How can I tell? Anybody have any idea? Yeah, absolutely. I can see a shadow underneath it. So let's talk about this white cube. This is a super important tool to have in TinkerCAD and use. Right now, the cube says that I can see the top view and the front view. So I can see the top of my cylinder and I can see the front of my cylinder. But if you click on any of these words, it will spin your shapes so that you can only see the front view, for example. So go ahead and click on front. And now you can clearly see that the cylinder is not sitting on your work plane. There's other ways to change the view. You can click on these arrows and this should show now right and back and left and back to front. Or you can click the top and bottom arrows and then you will see the top and left arrows. There's also though what's called the house, the home button. If you click this home tool, it always spins your cube to top and front again. So no matter how you have this spun around, you click the home button and it always goes back to top and front. Now, besides just clicking, you can also take like an edge, for example, click down your mouse and hold it, and then you can spin this. And you can also click on one of these vertex and go ahead and spin it. Again, you want to get it back to normal, just click the home button and it'll always go back to top and front. Now, this is one important thing to know. If you click this corner right here, where I'm wiggling my mouse, it'll show the top, front, and right view. And I hope that looks familiar to you because when we were talking about different views and I was showing you the dice, I had it in this position. This is a really common way to show a 3D object from the top, front, and right view. So I'm going to click the home button and put this back to top and front. You can do so as well. And again, I know that this is floating in the air because I can see a shadow. I want this to sit flat on the work plane. There's a super easy way to do this. If you click on the object, I'll click off of it for now and show you what I mean. Click on the object. There's a letter that you can press on your keyboard to drop this down onto the work plane. What letter do you think you would choose to drop this down on your work plane? Yeah, you got it, the letter D. So click on that cylinder so it's chosen, and then press D on your keyboard and watch, it'll drop down to the work plane. And to know for sure, click on the word front on this white cube in the upper left, and you can see that it's clearly sitting on the work plane. Next, let's talk about how to raise and lower an object using a different tool rather than the drop tool that only allows us to drop the object directly on the work plane. We're going to learn how to raise and lower it off the work plane, even below the work plane. So first, it's going to be helpful to view this from the front view. So we'll make sure that front is clicked on your white cube. And next, you also have to have the object chosen. So if I were to click off the object, I wouldn't see my raise and lower tool. But if I click on it, now I can see my dimension tools, and I'll also see my rotate tools. And lastly, I see this triangle. It's a solid black triangle, and that's my raise and lower tool. So if I hold down my mouse and I bring it up and down, I can raise it above the work plane and below the work plane. And if you notice to the right, you can see numbers. Right now it says -21, -26. That means I'm going below the work plane. And this is all in millimeters, of course. And then if I position it at 0, it'll be on my work plane. And if I position it up, then it's rising above my work plane. So I'm just going to put this back to 0 so it's sitting flat on my work plane, and you can do the same. If you can't get it quite to 0, you're having trouble, then D for drop on your keyboard will drop it down. Okay, let's go ahead and click the home button so we can see the top and front view again. Let's click off all of our shapes and use the fit tool to put everything into perfect view. So right now, we've always had our blue work plane. We're going to talk about changing your work plane so that the objects that you drag over fall onto a different view onto your object. So right now, all of our objects are sitting on the blue work plane. And we know that there are 6 different views to choose from. What view do you think this work plane is on? The 6 different views would be top, bottom, front, back, or right and left. If you said bottom, you are absolutely correct. Right now, our work plane is on the bottom view, and that's where it normally is unless we decide to change it. But there is this work plane tool right here on the upper right of your screen. Go ahead and click on that work plane and then drag that over. You'll see this blue box this blue like work plane that'll turn an orange color. And let's click on the top of our red box, and see what happens. Now the work plane is on the top. It's a little bit hard to see from this view, but if you click the front on your white cube, then you can clearly see it's on the top of your red box. Go ahead and click home again and fit to view. I want you to drag over a blue sphere and drop it onto that work plane. And if you click the front view, you should notice that the blue sphere is now sitting on the top of your red box. Sometimes you have to adjust this. It doesn't quite work out right. So here I'm just adjusting it so it makes more sense. And now I can clearly see that my blue sphere is sitting on the top of my red box because that's where my work plane is, and it dropped onto the work plane. You can go ahead and just spin this around and see it from different views. And then click the home button again and the fit to view. But don't forget, I am on my blue sphere right now. So if I click fit to view, the blue sphere is going to come into view. So I have to click onto my work plane first and then click fit to view so that everything comes into view. Let's go ahead and dimension the sphere. So click on the sphere, the blue sphere, and I want to show you a little trick. So before we were always changing the width and the depth and the height all separately. There's a way to change them all at once so they all proportionately get either bigger or smaller. So you could never end up with this oblong shape, and that's using the shift tool. So on your keyboard, if you press down the shift tool and then at the same time drag these dimensions, you'll notice that everything is dimensioning the same. And that's what I want you guys to do. And why don't you make that 20 by 20 by 20? So this sphere should be 20 wide, 20 deep, 20 tall. And you can use the shift tool to do it, but of course you don't have to. You could just manually put in all the dimensions. Next, we're going to position this so that it is in the middle of the top view here. So we don't want it too far backward or forward or too far to the right and left. We're going to center it the best we can. So you may have to use your cube here to spin things around. And if you click on the sphere, you can either drag it, or I like to use my arrow keys on my keyboard. So I'm just going to use my cube and spin it around again. And now use my arrow keys and get it about centered. That looks good. Then I'll click my home button again, click onto the work plane, and then fit. Let's do one more thing. Let's actually sink this sphere down into the red box so the sphere has to sink below the work plane. So go ahead and click on the blue sphere. And do you remember the tool that might lower this sphere below the work plane? Yeah, you got it. It's this triangle right here, this black triangle. So go ahead and click and hold down your mouse and drag it, and you can see that it's sinking below the work plane, and now it's actually sinking into your red box. How far do you want me to have you sink it in? It's up to you. Just make sure it's showing at least a little. So partially, even further, either one is fine. When we're done using this work plane, we can return our work plane back to normal, and there's two ways you can do that. You can click the work plane right here, and then click this blue frame, and it returns it back to normal. I'm going to click undo so I can show you a second way. You can click the work plane tool on the right, and then the home button on the left. And last but not least, I'm going to click fit, so everything's back into view. Let's talk about how to make holes in TinkerCAD. So I want to create two holes through this red box. I'm going to use this shape right here, the sphere, to do it. So first, I can make the sphere into a hole. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And then I see that right now it's a solid green shape. I'm going to click hole. And that now has changed my sphere into a hole. Next, I want to put that sphere through this red box. So what work plane, what face do you think I would want the work plane on, and then drop the hole onto the work plane in order to make that happen? If you said front, you're correct. So first I'm going to go ahead and change my work plane to the front view. I'm going to click work plane, and I'm going to click front. Now I'm going to click this hole, and I'm going to press D for drop, and it's going to drop that onto the work plane. And now if I spin my cube around, I can see that it is now dropped onto that work plane. Now I can take this sphere and use my arrows and move it to the right or to the left, up and down. I'm going to move it in the position of where a left eye might be. I've just clicked off, so the hole is no longer chosen. And I need two eyes. Now I could create a whole other sphere and redimension it and turn it into a hole, but there's an easier way. I'm going to basically copy that. And if you've used a lot of other programs, you're probably very familiar with how to do that. If you're doing a Google Doc, for example, how would you copy and paste? It's the same way. They also offer a duplicate tool, which is kind of a two-in-one. It copy and paste together. So let's just choose the copy and paste first. So go ahead and click on the whole and just Control C and Control V, and it should copy it. There's another way. You can also use what's called the duplicate tool. And watch what happens when I click the duplicate tool. It appears like nothing happens. With the duplicate tool, it kind of can confuse you because it duplicates and puts one exactly on top of the other, and you can't even tell there's two. So I always use my arrows on my keyboard to separate them. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now I have the two holes. However, they're not actually going through my block, so they won't appear as holes. So let me go ahead and click on one of them. And you can see that this raise lower tool appears. And I'm going to go ahead and sink that into the red block. And I want it to penetrate all the way through from front to back. It still won't show as a hole though, because what I need to do is group this hole with my red box. Now you could use your mouse and drag a square, but sometimes you choose not just the hole in the red box, but you accidentally group other things with it. So I think a more precise way is to hold down your Shift key. So right now I have the hole chosen. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click on the red box. And then you choose group right here, this tool. And now this actually looks like a hole. My right one doesn't. I want you to do something a little different with the other hole. Maybe it's your left one. I didn't specify which one you had to make go all the way through, but this hole went all the way through. We're going to make this one only go partially through. Do you have any idea how to make that happen? First, you're going to click on the hole. Then I like to position this so I'm looking at a side view. And then I'm just going to drag or raise or lower this into the red cube. But what I don't want is to go all the way through this time. So I don't want this. I want to make sure that I stop short of that. And then again, I need to group. So the hole is chosen, hold down Shift, click the red box, and then this tool right here, group. And then click onto the work plane. And now you can see that one hole goes all the way through and one doesn't. I want yours to be the same. I didn't specify that I want it to left to go all the way through and the right not, so yours might be opposite, but one hole should go all the way through and one should not. Now you can change your work plane back to normal. Again, there's two ways to do it. Click work plane and this blue frame or the home button. Let me try that again. There we go. And as long as I click on the work plane and I haven't chosen one specific object, if I click fit, it's going to bring everything into view. If I click front, I'll be able to see the holes more clearly. Perfect. Grouping is easy. You can either hold down your mouse button and draw a box around the things that you want to group, and then choose the group tool. Or you can click the object that you want to group, only one of them, hold down Shift, click the other object you want to group it with, and group. I find that using the Shift option is better because you're more accurate. If you accidentally draw your box around more than the objects that you actually want to group, you might accidentally group, for example, this cylinder with your red box. So I always like to click on one of the objects I want to group, hold down Shift, and then click all of the other objects I want to group with it. When you group it, everything will turn one color, but there's a way to fix that. Let me show you. All you have to do is then go to solid and click the multicolor, and then all the colors will go back to normal. So we're going to take a screenshot of this and put it on our worksheet so you can get full credit. First, make sure you have the front view so we can clearly see a hole that goes all the way through and one that goes partially through. Next, you need to take a screenshot. You want a screenshot of everything, including your name here, so we know that it's your work. So on a Mac, I have to do Shift Command 3. However, if you're on a Chromebook, then you're going to do Control. That's the key on the lower left, CTRL, Control, and then the key above the number 6. When you do that, you're going to see something in the lower right that says Copy to Clipboard. You're going to click Copy to Clipboard, and then you're going to go into the document and paste it with a Control V. So again, with a Chromebook, to take a screenshot, Control and the key above the number 6 on your keyboard. Then click Copy to Clipboard, go to the document, click where you want it to go with your cursor, and then Control V. I'm going to do it on my MacBook. So I do Shift Command 3. This is where on a Chromebook you would see Copy to Clipboard. Now I have to copy it with a Command C, but this will be very different again if you're on a Chromebook. And then I need to paste it into the document. So go ahead and open that TinkerCAD Practice Using Tools worksheet once you've taken a screenshot and copied it to the clipboard. And then you're just going to click your cursor right here, and then you're going to paste it. And now I can see that it's my work because my last name Practice is here. This is exactly what yours should look like. If you scroll down further, you're going to notice number 2. Now make a monster in TinkerCAD. Let your imagination run wild. Use this as an opportunity to practice using the work plane, dimensions, holes, raise lower tools, etc. Even the rotate tools. So please use this as an opportunity to practice all of the tools we learned by making a monster. So it can be anything you want. You could use a square box as the head of the monster, and then you could add crazy hair and crazy ears and crazy nose, anything that you want. And at the end, you're going to name it last name monster, like you did up here when you named it last name practice, and you're going to take another screenshot and paste it below. There's a really cool tool called the Scribble tool that I didn't talk about. It's a great tool to make a mouth. So you can go ahead and investigate that and try to figure out how to use it. And I hope you have a lot of fun practicing using all the tools in TinkerCAD to make your monster.